Another one that I love a lot is grit. This one is just such a great characteristic to bring out in an interview. It could also be a resilience or a tenacity about you, but this is never giving up. This is, I don't just throw my hands in the air when I meet an obstacle or a hurdle. I figure out a way around it, over it, under it, through it. I'm going to ask more questions. I can show a sense of, I'm going to go get more data. I'm going to go look for another possible solution. This is that place where you don't just sit around and wait for somebody else to tell you what the solution is. Grit is that ability to, when you get kind of beat down or you thought you had a really winning presentation and your boss hated it, you can just figure out what went wrong and fix it and move on and do it even better the next time. And so having ability to really bounce back is important. And this comes out a lot in interview questions too, especially when you ask that question of tell me about a time when you failed. So when a candidate can talk honestly about what they did that was a failure, but then how they bounced back from it, the accepts feedback and the grit combination work well together within the same story. And so often the best candidates are telling stories in those interviews that pull all of these things together, and they're referencing characteristics about themselves that pull on all of these and they don't even realize they're doing it. But grit is super important. And so just think about times and think about stories that you can tell that show your ability to keep going and persevering and not being happy with the status quo. And then let's move down to critical thinker. This one is a little bit harder to suss out sometimes, but critical thinking is huge, 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 huge. And this is the ability to take disparate pieces of information and come up with a recommendation or a solution. And this doesn't happen at just the highest levels of an organization. This happens at the lowest levels too. When you're a service technician and we're sending you out on a call to fix somebody's scale in a food processing facility, you may be in a situation where you notice that something else they have is going wrong and you have to in the moment kind of solve through that punch list and figure it out. And you have to be a critical thinker to do that. And so, you know, critical thinking is like when your car breaks down on the highway on your way to work or to an interview, what are you going to do? Like you have to think critically and you have to solve your problem in the span of 30 seconds and you don't have time to wait for somebody else to tell you what the answer is. You've got to move. And critical thinking it also shows in that ability to be decisive and make a decision. And it may be wrong, and that's okay. Making a decision is often better than not making one at all. And so being able to take the pieces of information that you do have readily available and applying what you know, and then making educated guesses about the pieces that you don't have all the information for, and putting it together to come up with a recommendation or a solution. That's the skill set that we look for in critical thinking. So then moving on to ownership, this one falls a lot, you could also call it accountability, but I like ownership better because I think that really brings home the difference between really owning it and just being accountable for it. And so there's a spectrum of accountability. There's being held to accountability, meaning I'm okay when somebody says, I'm relying on you to finish this report. And then there's accepting accountability where I know that I'm responsible to do this report versus embracing accountability, which is I have the skill set and the desire to do this report without being told. And I look for people that are on that far end of the spectrum about embracing accountability, that instead of being continually pushed by external forces, whether that's me as their boss or financial reasons, well, I want to get paid, so I'm going to do this. They're intrinsically motivated. They're instinctively, internally wanting to do these things because it gives them that motivation on their own to be accountable for the job at hand. And so this is also where that question about tell me about a time when you failed comes into play, because I look to see how much they own the error. And I look to see how much of it they put the blame on themselves versus other people in the group. Or even if it was somebody else in the group that was responsible for it, as part of the team, they're still accountable to the situation. And so ownership is huge. Being able to show that you're accountable and you don't need to be pushed by your boss every 5 seconds is a huge characteristic. And you have to bring that level of accountability to the interview process because everyone is busy and everyone has a lot of things to do. And we're looking for candidates that can just get up and show up and start doing it, and they know what they're supposed to do every day. and they like to finish it. I like people that are motivated by, I want to finish it. I want to get it done. So these last three kind of go together. They overlap a little bit. Focus, for me, is that ability to not waste energy. Focus is they're not easily distracted. They understand how to define their success, and it's not in terms of time. So when people are telling us about a really great campaign or a really great project they worked on, I don't want to hear that the thing that made it so great is that, oh, it took 4 weeks. I don't care how much time it took. I care that it met results. And so for the candidates that can take the work that they're doing and apply it to the bigger business objective or the bigger goal of the organization, whether that's revenue or growing leaders or whatever it is, that's much more important to me than the ones that view their success in terms of time. And so we know that society today is like endlessly busy and people are super stressed out and they have a lot on their plates. But bragging about how busy they are is not something that we want to talk about. So I loved the questions that Kim put up about why are you leaving your current job? I'm not looking to hear things like, oh, I work too many hours. I have all this overtime. I want more work-life balance, which I'm getting to in a minute. I don't want to hear that because it's more about that's on you. Like you own all of that about yourself and you have the ability to focus. And I want to know that the reasons why you're struggling are not around how many hours you're working, that you know how to prioritize and how to focus your work, which is a lot of what attention management is about. I think some people look for people that are really good at time management, but I look for people that are good at attention management. And so back to this issue of focus, attention management is the ability to look at your entire task list and know what needs to get done right now. And so a human can only get about 5 or 6 things done in an 8-hour workday. But if I have 13 things on my list, I have to figure out how to prioritize that. And one thing on there could take me 5 minutes and another thing could take an hour, but the thing that takes an hour is leading more directly to the business objectives. This is leading more directly to revenue or growth or whatever the thing is that I'm being charged to do. And so that deserves my attention more than this 5-minute project. So regardless of the time, you have to be able to focus and put your attention in on the top priorities. And I want to see that routinely in interviews. It's questions that I ask that are helping people understand how they manage their calendar. So even though that feels like a time management question, I'm super interested in people that have the ability to say things like, I specifically block off time on my calendar every week to write my blog posts or whatever those subjects are. It means they understand what their priorities are for the week and they're very specifically dedicating their attention management to the top things that have to get done first. And then that's why that plays into balance. So again, when we ask folks, why are you leaving? Why are you looking to leave your current role? When they say things like, I'm looking for more work-life balance, that's a huge red flag for me. Because if you think of balance like a teeter-totter, if something is balanced, you have to have equal weights on both sides. And we all know that isn't realistic in life. Life is never 50-50 between work and life. You're always going to have one side that's skewed more than the other because, things happen and that's the way it is. And so people that are high performers don't stress out about work-life balance. They have it together. They have it figured out. They know that sometimes life is going to require more of their attention, but they accommodate the work in order to make that happen. So they figure out how to adjust the work or get help on the work side in order to manage the life side, and then vice versa. And so high performers really understand how to take attention management and focus, and then the things on the other side of the scale, grit and critical thinking, and apply it to their whole spectrum of life and understand that I can shift things in different ways in order to get things done that are the most priority at home and at work. And they just kind of have it all figured out. So I really look for people that the work-life balance is not something that they're concerned about in an interview. So, okay, I breezed through that super fast. Usually this is like a 45-minute presentation when I'm doing it with people like Craig and Kim, but I hope that helped a little bit. I think I'm turning it back to Stephanie for questions. So if anybody wants to dig into any of those, we certainly can.
Thank you so much, Cate. That was really great information, and I hope was super helpful for everybody that was in attendance. I know every time I hear you speak about things like this, I'm always like, yeah, that's how she gets really good people on her team. Why?
Well, I have to be honest, I hired Stephanie at one time, and so she would be a perfect example of all 8 of those